Welcome to the Primetime Podcast, everybody, hosted here on the MVG Nick YouTube channel. My name is Nick, and I hope you guys are doing well whenever you are checking out this latest episode of the show, episode 8 for you guys, one that I am very excited to get into with you guys here. This is something that I've seen a few other YouTubers in the space do over the years and wanted to try it for myself here on the podcast, and that is doing a very casual, nice discussion-based episode that anyone can feel free to join in on, as this is just a very, very simple concept that we are going to be discussing today, and that is just simply talking about some of our favorite TV shows within certain genres that we would want with us on our desert island as a sort of a metaphor, if you will, for the best shows of all time there that you would want for the rest of time, your desert island picks, if you will. And this is something that, like I said, some other YouTubers have done in the past that I really, really enjoyed watching some of their takes on, but I wanted to try it for myself here. A very, very simple, straightforward concept, no technical, no stats like we've had in the last couple episodes, just very, very simple here. And the way that we're going to do it is we're going to break it down by genre here. I have about 15 to 20 different subgenres that we're going to go over here, and I'm going to give you my favorite show that pertains to each of them here that I would want with me on my desert island there. So the first one that we're going to talk about here is comedy type shows, one of my favorites, if not my favorite genre on TV there. We have 6 of them here to go over, as you can see listed on the screen there. All of the main sort of, overall umbrella type genres like comedy we will present, and then we'll break down into subcategories like we see here. So the first one we have is the multi-camera / laugh track sitcom, pretty self-explanatory. Next up is mockumentary, the sort of documentary style, stuff like The Office or Parks and Rec would fall into that. Then we have teen sitcom, that's the Nickelodeon and the Disney Channel type stuff. From back in the day. We have voiceover / narration sitcom that's been extremely popular in the last few years as well. We have the animated sitcoms like Family Guy, Simpsons, you guys know those as well. And then finally, sketch comedy here, which is a little bit different, not a sitcom necessarily, but still in the comedy genre. One of my personal favorites as well that I would love to discuss with you guys. So with that in mind, those are the first 6 that we're going to go over here that we're going to break down, beginning with the laugh track sitcom. Now, this one is super competitive. There are tons and tons of options to go over with this one. Some of the biggest shows of all time land in this particular genre, such as Seinfeld, Friends, Cheers, The Big Bang Theory. You have a world to explore with these types of shows. Like I said, some of the best, period, fall under this one. So of all of them, which one do I go with here as my favorite? This might be a bit of a controversial take because this show, for many people, is one that's very, very underrated, not really enjoyed by that many. I often see it has a bit of a negative response online, but it is personally one of my all-time favorites, easily in my top 5, and that is going to be Mike and Molly here to kick us off with. This is a great, great, great show. If you've never seen it, highly recommend it. It follows the titular characters Mike and Molly, of course, played by Billy Gardell and Melissa McCarthy, and it follows their relationship as a couple, as you can imagine. Definitely the first couple seasons, we see them gradually go through some life experiences together. They start dating, they eventually get engaged and get married, which is awesome. It's a very, very heartwarming show at times. It can be very sad at times too, but very, very funny, especially with all the side characters like Carl and Joyce and Vince, who is definitely my favorite. I've talked about that previously on my channel. I absolutely love Vince. He's one of my all-time favorite characters, period, but especially on Mike and Molly here. And this is a show that I could watch over and over and over again. In fact, I have before, probably seen it all the way through at least 3 or 4 times. Probably my number one show that I've watched from start to finish the most of all of these. So definitely taking this with me to my desert island here as my favorite of the laugh track style here. Moving on to the mockumentary genre here, another one that's very competitive. We have, like I said earlier, The Office, Parks and Rec. You have stuff like Arrested Development falls in here. You have some modern ones like The Real Bros of Simi Valley and stuff like that. But for me personally, even though those are all very respectable shows and all very popular, big fan bases, I am going to go with my second favorite show of all time here, which is going to be Modern Family here. This is just another one that's super, super heartwarming. Great cast on this. All the characters have excellent chemistry, and it's really cool to see them go through, the life experiences again here. All the kids, watching them grow up throughout the show is really, really cool as well. This was on for over a decade, so you can imagine there is a lot of changes from season 1 to season 11, which was the final one, including what some people would say is a dip in quality. Personally, I would disagree with that. I think the later seasons are very, very good as well. I do prefer the older ones, of course. The first 5 to 6, I would say, are essential viewing for everyone out there. But the later ones definitely have their moments as well. I was actually rewatching some episodes from season 11 recently for another video I'm working on, and definitely found myself laughing quite a bit throughout them. So this is another one I could watch over and over again. Some individual episodes I've probably seen upwards of 15 to 20 times. I just cannot get enough of Modern Family there. So another one that is definitely essential for me to have on my desert island there. All right, moving on to the teen sitcom category. Now, this one is definitely going to be controversial regardless of who you ask. I think it's safe to say that if you grew up in the late 90s, throughout the 2000s, and into the early 2010s like I did, then you will definitely have a strong opinion on this one here. Whether you prefer Drake and Josh, Zoe 101, Victorious, Ned's Declassified, Wizards of Waverly Place, Hannah Montana, regardless of what your pick is, someone out there is going to agree with you and someone is definitely going to disagree with you. So this one will be very interesting to see how the comments play out. But for me personally, my favorite of all of them on Nickelodeon here specifically is definitely iCarly. This is definitely the most nostalgic show that I have on this entire list as we'll go through here. Definitely found myself rewatching these all the time. They were always in reruns back in the day. Most 2000s people know, if they were big fans of Nickelodeon like I was, you saw them constantly rerunning some of those big event episodes like I Go to Japan, I Party with Victorious, and my personal favorite, I Saved Your Life, which we talked about in a previous podcast episode when we were discussing some of the best TV episodes out there. I brought that one up, and that is definitely my favorite of the series there. Another one that I've seen multiple times on end. But the show itself is just very, very fun. It's not going to be the top, quality wise. It's not going to compete against some of the other big sitcoms like we've seen already, but just in terms of just having fun and being just a very lighthearted show, this is a great one to check out, and definitely a nostalgic one, like I said earlier. So easily for me, the best teen sitcom there going to be iCarly. All right, next up here, we have a bit of a different genre, the voiceover/narration sitcom here. This is becoming more and more common, I think, within the past, maybe 5 or so years. A lot of the modern ABC comedies have adopted this style into their sort of storytelling within their sitcoms, and you've seen that on stuff like The Goldbergs, Blackish, Fresh Off the Boat, American Housewife. All those shows implement these as well. But funny enough, my personal favorite show of all time, I think, perfectly fits into this category there. And as many of you know by now, that is How I Met Your Mother. Some people might disagree with this because they would argue that it fits more in the laugh track style. It does utilize a laugh track, and it is shot with a multi-camera setup, but the narration and the voiceover of the older Ted within the context of the show is definitely sort of the driving force behind all of the events that go on there. It's definitely the more kind of recognizable aspect versus the laugh track, so that's why it's included here. And this show needs no introduction, especially if you are a fan of my channel or you've seen any other one of my TV-related videos. I literally talk about this show in every single one of them, so I'm not going to, run on with how much I love it. You guys already know about it. But yes, definitely taking this one with me as well here under the voice-over/narration category. All right, moving on to our last sitcom category here. The last for the genre here is the animated sitcom. This is another one that, depending on who you ask, they might have a totally different answer than you, because this has become a super, super competitive genre in the last few years as well. Almost oversaturated, depending on who you ask, because a lot of the sort of cable networks and like Netflix and a lot of the streaming have put out some of their own original animated sitcoms in the last few years as well. So it's becoming a little bit more of a quantity over quality at times, but there are still definitely a good amount that have rose up throughout the years as some of the greatest TV out there. And my personal pick for it is going to be Family Guy here. Definitely another one that's a bit controversial. I could definitely go with something like The Simpsons as well. South Park is a great choice. Even older than that would be something like The Flintstones, which I think very, very iconic and super influential for all these shows to come out. But if you just ask me point blank, what is my favorite of all of these adult animated sitcoms, Family Guy is your answer there. Of course, everyone knows the basic structure of Family Guy. You follow the titular Family Guy, which is Peter, of course, Peter Griffin, and his wacky family consisting of Lois, Meg, Chris, Brian, and Stewie, and all his antics that go on in the show. I think everyone out there has at least one or two Family Guy episodes that they wholeheartedly love, that they could watch over and over again. For me, the best sort of era of Family Guy as well would probably be around like season 7 up until around season 12. I think that's when they really hit their stride, putting out some really, really spectacular episodes for the series. A lot of people love the older ones as well, the first 3 before the cancellation, of course, that ended up kind of hurting the show, and then fans, they were so passionate about it that it was brought back, of course, in 2005. So those early seasons definitely have a lot of fanfare out there as well, and those are great as well. But for me, between like I said, about 7 to 12, I think is really the golden era of Family Guy. But no matter what era you love, we can all agree that it is a must-watch show. Definitely taking it with me under the animated sitcom category. All right, our final category under the comedy type part of this podcast here is going to be sketch comedy here. This is a genre that I love. There are so many shows in this format that I absolutely cannot get enough of, but I've never really gone too deep into discussing it on this channel. Maybe in the future we'll do a ranking of some of my favorite sketch comedy shows, but if I can only pick one to have, I'm going to go with the OG, the big kahuna of the category, and that, of course, is going to be Saturday Night Live. I know a lot of people rag on SNL nowadays, saying that it hasn't been good since, the 90s or even before then. It started all the way back, of course, in 1975 there. You can see the original cast of the show on the left-hand side there, and then the newer cast on the right, so kind of the evolution of the show, which is really cool to see. But I love all of it, man. All 47 seasons they're currently in now, almost 50 years going on for this show. Really, really super iconic. I think, again, everyone out there, even the most, passionate vocal people that say, the very negative things about it, can look at this show and respect and understand why it's so popular and why it's made such a big impact over the years. The amount of just raw, amazing talent that's come out of the show. Some of the most famous and most popular comedic actors of all time got their start on SNL and have been paving the way for decades now. So absolutely a treasure for me. Easily, again, in my top 5 favorite shows of all time there. Watch it every single week and absolutely love it. So SNL, they're going to wrap up the comedy section of this video here. All right, as we go into our next portion of it here, let's talk about some of the best when it comes to the drama genre. Now, this one was a little bit harder to break down all of the different sub-genres that I wanted because there are so many out there, right? You could pick through hundreds and hundreds of them. It seems like there's always some great drama shows to check out there. But these 7, I think, pretty much give a nice spread of what is out there to pick from and gives us a nice variety to discuss here. So we have action, of course. That's a very broad type of genre, and I'll go into that a little bit more in detail. Some of my thoughts on that when we get to it in just a second here. But that's obviously one of the most popular, so I had to include it here under this section. Next up, we have the police procedural genre, cop shows. Again, pretty self-explanatory there. Crime dramas, those are extremely popular. Some of the best of all time fall under that. We have sci-fi / fantasy, science fiction, of course, another one that's hugely popular within the space. Medical shows, probably about half of what's on TV right now, falling under that genre as well there. Superhero shows becoming increasingly popular as well with the Marvel stuff and on Disney Plus and all that as well. The CW as well having a great lineup of superhero type shows on their platform. And then finally, anthology series here, very, very underrated. Shows that utilize similar casts, or repeating actors throughout the seasons or even the episodes of shows, but each individual season or episode, depending on the series, is its own plot with its own characters, very unique to that one episode, right? Very self-contained, which is nice. If you don't want to watch through, 10 seasons of a show, you can just watch one episode and all the plot and everything be very self-contained within it. So a very convenient way to watch there, and there are some great examples of that we'll go into as well. So for this one, let's start off with the action drama here. Like I said, this is a very broad sort of inclusion here. Lots of different shows could fall under the term of action, right? It's a very, very generic sort of phrase or sort of description of many shows. I think you could call any of these other like police procedural type shows under the action genre. If you wanted to say like Law and Order perhaps as an action show, I think you could definitely convince someone that falls under it. You could call a show like Chicago Fire, for instance, an action show. There's plenty of explosives and practical stunts on that show as well, so I think that could fall under here. You have stuff like 24, right, with Kiefer Sutherland, definitely an action drama. So I think even though it's a very, very broad topic, pretty much any show that you could convincingly argue for as an action show could fall in line here. And for me, I am going to call that one of my all-time favorites here falls under the action drama here, because it is plenty action-filled each and every episode, and that is going to be The Walking Dead here. This is a show that I recently discovered, as many of you know, only this year in 2021. Beforehand, I'd never seen it. I thought it was very, very overrated. Did not really give it a fair shake until I started watching it alongside my girlfriend, and we absolutely fell in love with it, and like I said, it's become one of my all-time favorites here. Definitely the older seasons, I agree with many people out there that is definitely the golden era of the show. Between like 1 and 6, I would say, are definitely the standouts in terms of the best seasons and where the best episodes lie. But for sure, some of the later episodes as well have some great moments all the same, and are easily some of the most action-packed for the entire series, which again, I think is great to argue for the action drama category there. Even though it is very generic, you can still make a solid argument that it falls in line there within the series. Sorry, I'm getting a drink here. I come back. All right, let's talk about police procedurals now. This is definitely a different type of show, I think, than something like The Walking Dead, of course. but even more so, probably more in line with something that I would typically want to watch myself. These are some of the biggest franchises on TV right now. I think definitely hold a lot of weight in terms of the general quantity of shows made in this particular style here. From the CSIs, NCISs, you have things like Blue Bloods out there. You have FBIs right now on CBS, extremely popular as well. But one of my favorite all-time franchises fall in line here, and I'm going to pick my favorite of the series within that franchise, which is going to be Law and Order Special Victims Unit. Again, this is a show that I've talked endlessly about on previous videos. We've talked about it in the drama tournament. Of course, it was the #1 show in that video, and for good reason, because it absolutely kicks ass when it comes to any of the police procedural type shows. Dick Wolf, of course, I've talked about as well as one of my all-time favorites. I'm watching a ton of his shows on TV right now, of course, SVU being one of them, and just absolutely cannot get enough of this one either. Recently, it aired its 500th episode. As of the recording of this, it was actually just last week, and that was a great episode, even all these years later, over 20 years in the making for that, and still top quality even to this day. So easily taking this one with me. Not going to get bored of this whatsoever, as there are so many episodes to watch through. Law & Order Special Victims Unit there. Moving on next to the crime drama genre. Now, this one is pretty much your golden sort of genre when it comes to just the quality of shows made within it here. You have, of course, The Sopranos, right? Arguably the best show on TV ever made. You have things like The Wire here, one of HBO's strongest shows as well. You could argue maybe a little more in the police genre for that one as well, but certainly has its crime elements. And of course, the one that I am going to go with, one of AMC's most astounding shows of all time there, going with Breaking Bad here. Now, I have not seen as much of Breaking Bad as some other people, but what I've seen of it within the first couple of seasons, I absolutely love. Bryan Cranston, of course, as the lead, as Walter White, is phenomenal on this show. You have Aaron Paul, of course, as Jesse, who does a great job as well. Some other characters like Skyler I really like. There's Hank, of course. There's so many great actors and performances on the show. And of course, the crime element to it is is like front and center on the series as well there, with them, of course, going into the drug business and dealing with all of the consequences that comes along with it, and all the people they have to face off against as well there. Very, very captivating, very thrilling show at times as well. Easily a top tier drama for sure there. Next up, we have the sci-fi or fantasy type genre here. Many people, I think, if you asked them what is your favorite in this particular genre, would probably say something like Lost, for instance, was a great sci-fi show. It had some very mysterious elements to it. You have people that would probably say something like Game of Thrones as well, as part of the fantasy element to it. Of course, the medieval kind of setting that they bring to that show is very, very captivating for a lot of people. But for me, I'm not the biggest fan of sci-fi or fantasy in general here, so I'm going to take this opportunity to highlight a very, very underrated show that I absolutely love, that I think is definitely worth checking out here if you want a good recommendation for a great sci-fi show, and that is going to be the short-lived Siberia here. This show launched back in 2013 on NBC in the summer of 2013, and it was only around for a single season, but at the time, it was probably one of the most exciting shows on TV. It had some great mysterious, is really atmospheric show, some really interesting found footage elements, if you're a fan of stuff like Paranormal Activity, for instance, or the Blair Witch Project, of course, kind of paving the way for a lot of that to come out. If you like that sort of style where It's supposed to be like, you're not really sure what's going on, and these characters, they're kind of solving this mystery as they go along, and all this supernatural stuff going on as well within this weird kind of remote setting. If you like anything like that, this is definitely the show for you. And recently it was put on Tubi, where you can watch it for free, which is awesome. I actually rediscovered it not too long ago when it was put up back in the summer, and thoroughly watched through it once again and enjoyed it very, very much. Easily one that I think holds up, and actually was a little bit ahead of its time back in 2013, over a decade or nearly a decade later, becoming one of my favorites still to this day. So again, if you want a very, very good sci-fi type show with some great mysterious atmosphere to it, then Siberia is definitely one to check out there. That is going to be my pick for the sci-fi genre. All right, moving on to the medical drama here. This one in the past I've talked about, again, that I'm not really a big fan of medical dramas. I would say most of them, in fact, are pretty much not really my bag at all. Just not really something that I feel I can relate to, or I'm, very close with. I definitely prefer, as far as like the kind of first responder, if you will, type characters or shows like that. I like the police procedurals, as you could tell, more, or even something like Chicago Fire or 911, where it's like firefighter type stuff as well. But medical dramas, so they're a little bit hit or miss for me. But one in particular, I think, definitely stands above the rest here. Even though it's not the most iconic or most popular, I think quality-wise it is the best of them, and that is going to be Chicago Med here. Of course, I love the Chicago shows between Fire and PD, and Med is also one of them that I am growing into. I would definitely say it's my least favorite of the three, as you can imagine, but it's definitely better than a lot of the other medical shows I've seen. In general, I would say those are more shows that I respect, like Grey's Anatomy or ER, those very long-running ones. I have a lot of respect for those shows, and I can definitely see why people enjoy them the way they do. But for me, they just come off really kind of cheesy and cliche at times. Chicago Med, I think, avoids a lot of those tropes that plague a lot of those other shows, and focus definitely more on the characters, which the performances are great on them. It's Dick Wolf produced, so you're going to get quality drama with Dick Wolf behind it, and just in general, pretty exciting show overall in terms of this genre that I feel like is pretty oversaturated as well here. Next up, we have superhero type shows. This one is a bit hit or miss as well for me. I've never really been too big on the CW type stuff, like The Flash or Arrow or anything like that. But I can definitely see, again, why those are very, very popular. They kind of have that in-universe crossover appeal. They do a lot of crossovers within the shows and within the series as well. So that can be very exciting. But for me, this genre was not really explored as much as I was hoping for it until Disney Plus came out with their Marvel type shows recently this year. And of the three that are the most notable between Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, and the one I'm picking, which, if you couldn't guess at this point, is WandaVision. I like WandaVision the best of them. I initially started watching the show due to the sitcom elements. It was very heavily marketed that it was going to be a bit of a homage, if you will, or tribute to some classic black and white sitcoms like I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke and stuff like that. And they do parody and kind of, portray those types of shows within this series as well in a really creative and very fun way. Later, they do it with shows like Malcolm in the Middle and Modern Family, again, kind of touching on some of those other styles like the narration or the mockumentary we saw earlier, kind of paying homage to those different genres as well, which is really cool. But there's some great action scenes as well, and obviously it does focus on the superhero type genre with the Marvel characters Wanda and Vision respectively. There's some other actors like Kat Dennings and Randall Park are on the show that I really like as well, that are kind of tying it into the sitcom elements as well. They're notable for being on some very popular sitcoms as well there. But in general, this is definitely one that I think had a ton of potential and was executed very, very well. And I think of those three, like I said, is the top dog in that rank. And finally, here, as we end with the rest of the drama type genres here, we stop with the anthology series. Now, this one was tough because there's two basic kinds of these types of shows. There's ones where the season as a whole has its own plot and it almost acts as kind of like a mini series, and then when they transition to the next season, they keep the same cast, but they do a different plot with new characters and new story arcs and all that stuff. And then there's ones where each individual episode is its own contained story, with usually a different cast portraying it, and it's a good way to bring in guest actors and stuff like that if you want to hype up certain episodes, like many of these have done. But for me, it really came down to two shows in that latter category, the ones where it's an individual episode, is its self-contained story, and those were either going to be The Twilight Zone, which was kind of the first to do it with some of those sci-fi horror elements like we saw earlier, or the one that I'm going with, which is kind of a more modern, updated, revamped version of it, which is Black Mirror here. I've really gotten into this show in the last few months, actually. When I made my top 100 best TV show project, this one was prominently featured on it. But at the time, I didn't really know that much about it. I never watched it. But as of now, I can say I've seen probably about 10 to 15 episodes of the show. Not too many, considering how long it's been on for. But again, each one is self-contained, so it's not like more serialized where you have to keep an order there. You can just bounce around and watch whichever ones you want. And of those, everything that I've seen so far, I really do enjoy. Even some of the episodes that I know a lot of people were not as big of a fan of, like the Miley Cyrus one from season 5, I know is one of the more infamous ones. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought that was a really fun one. But personally, I really enjoyed that one as well. I thought that was a very clever and it had a nice script to it. It was written very well. So overall, Black Mirror there, my favorite of the anthology series. And then real quick, before we let go here and we end this episode, I want to quickly give you some of these more miscellaneous categories, these genres that don't really fit into the overall sort of either drama or comedy type styles that are a little bit more like different and kind of on their own there. So the first one we have is a kids cartoon. We already talked about the adult cartoons earlier, but something meant more for kids and teens. Then we have my favorite game show and reality competition here. So real quick, we'll just kind of speed through these. The favorite of the kids cartoon there, my all-time favorite cartoon, in fact, even over Family Guy here, Nickelodeon's fan favorite, SpongeBob. It really couldn't be anything else, to be honest with you. Of course, Regular Show is also up there. We've discussed Regular Show plenty of times on the podcast before, but really SpongeBob is, I think, my go-to in terms of any nostalgic cartoon that I was a big fan of, and I know many other people are as well. Another one that I think gets kind of ragged on nowadays in terms of the later seasons not getting their fair share of positive treatment, but again, there are some hidden gems throughout the later seasons as well that I think are worth digging up, but certainly nothing that's going to compare to those first 3 for me. Definitely the golden age, in my opinion. Next up here, my favorite game show, between your Jeopardies or Price is Right or, Wheel of Fortune, stuff like that. My favorite of these is going to be Family Feud here. This is probably my favorite to play along with, which I think is a very important element to game shows. For some of the other ones, they're a little bit more technical or they're a little bit more tricky to play along with. Something like Jeopardy has a very, very, specific demographic that it's going after. It's not as universal. I think Family Feud is very, very universal. Pretty much anyone of all ages can play along with it while watching, which is a lot of fun. And all the hosts over the years, Richard Dawson, Ray Combs, of course, Steve Harvey now, who has been doing it for, I think, the longest of any of the hosts. He's been doing it since, I think, like 2006. So it's been over 15 years or so since he's taken the reins, and he's definitely one of my favorites as well. But yeah, Family Feud here for my favorite game show really does not get old whatsoever. And then finally, to wrap up here, my favorite of these reality competitions here. This was a genre that I watched a ton of back in the day when I was a teen. Like between ages like 14 and 16, I watched a ton of these over the years. Stuff like American Idol, The Amazing Race were some of my favorites. There were a ton that were like very, very unique in terms of the sort of structure of them. Like The Amazing Race, I think, is a really, really interesting one. Had people competing all over the world in different challenges and seeing all these different places, which is a really cool idea. Of course, you have stuff like American Idol, like I mentioned, which is the singing talent type competition. But my favorite, if you want to call subgenre of this, is definitely the cooking competitions there. On cable as well, there's a few good ones, but for me, my favorite of all of them has to be MasterChef here, which is the one that I'm picking for this category. Any of the Gordon Ramsay type shows, like Hell's Kitchen is another good one, but MasterChef, I think, really did focus on the proper competition. It wasn't so much just for shock value or just for general entertainment. There was really a necessary level of talent that the people on the show had to have in order to really be, competitive enough to make it within the show. And that was always fun to watch, sort of the dichotomy between the contestants as well. I think all the judges over the years have been pretty good. I do love the original three there between Gordon, Graham, and Joe. I think that'll never be touched in terms of any of the replacements they've have had over the years. Christina and Aaron Sanchez are the ones that are on now alongside Gordon, and they're fine. I don't have a problem with them, but definitely those earlier seasons. Season 3 will always be my favorite with Christina as the winner, if you guys know for sure. Very, very, very fun and competitive show to watch alongside with root for the contestants as well, your favorites and least favorites, like all these competitions go. But yes, MasterChef there as my favorite of any of those shows as well there. So that is going to do it for today's podcast here. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe, of course, and also leave a comment. You can share all of these different genres, your favorites perhaps, or maybe just a couple of your favorite shows as well, and we can have a nice discussion there in the comments. So that is going to do it for me. Once again, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one here. Take care, everyone.